Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to get started now. My name is Kate Sparks. I'm the Director of Marketing here at RMS Omega, and I'm your moderator today. It looks like we've got a good group on the line. I spy a few partners of ours and a couple customers that have joined. I see some new names as well, so thank you for joining us today. We're going to be discussing the benefits of using RFID in the warehouse and talk about some of the challenges that a lot of you are experiencing given today's supply chain and the demand that's going on right now. This session is being recorded. If you have any questions or comments at any time, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A section of your control panel. We will be answering all of the questions at the end of the webinar. So now we're ready to get started with our discussion. I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have Danny Quokka and Josh Cooney. Both Danny and Josh are part of our RFID solutions team, and they're often involved with designing and implementing some of our complex data collection and RFID systems for our many customers here at RMS. So Josh and Danny, thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Excellent. And for our new folks on the line, if you are not familiar with RMS Omega, we are a technology systems integrator, and we specialize in data collection technology, tracking, and location technology solutions. We work with companies of all sizes. Some are very large Fortune 500 companies. We also work with many small to mid-sized organizations. So we have a lot of experience with different types of companies and organizations. I would like to share with everyone in attendance that we have a helpful guide available. It's called the Top 10 Myths and Misconceptions about RFID, and that provides some introductory information about RFID technology and its capabilities. This guide and infographic, it will be provided to you following our session today. Let's dive into our discussion. We're going to review different challenges that we're seeing in the warehouse today related to inventory accuracy and improving workflow efficiency. We'll then talk a little bit about the different components of an RFID system and best practices for how to get started with a new project. To start, I would like to share a poll with you all to hear about some of the challenges that you're experiencing currently. So I'm going to go ahead and throw a poll up there and would love some of your feedback. If you could all take a moment and give us a quick answer there. So we'll leave that up for just a few minutes. See if we get some answers coming in. Excellent. We're getting a few responses there. I know a lot of people are dealing with, labor and productivity shortages. Really, inventory accuracy is a big one that we've seen. Errors, handling, the increasing demand. So, and if there's anything else that's not up there, feel free to just type it in the other box. We'd be happy to chat about it with you. So, all right. I'm going to go ahead and share some of those results. It looks like maintaining accurate inventory, was our winner, minimizing errors and also handling demand. So with that in mind, Josh and Danny, how does that really relate to what you're seeing with some of our customers out in the world, and what are some of their pain points that they're dealing with?
Yeah, so I think that's obviously something that many people are concerned with when implementing technology is reducing human error specifically, or trying to automate process to make up for shortages, employee shortages, especially in this day and age where it's hard to get people to come to work, or for various reasons, we're having employee shortages in the workplace. So, that's the biggest one that I've talked about recently with a lot of customers, but almost everywhere we go, that is the number one thing that people are trying to accomplish when injecting technology into their processes, is reducing human error and creating efficiency that way. It's also something that's easier to quantify and justify and figure out a return on investment, because it's a tangible measurement, right? You can actually put a a time stamp on how quickly you can do things. So I see that almost everywhere we go, that is the number one reason for implementing any type of data capture solution. So in addition to that, obviously the labor shortages that I already touched on is a big thing. But supply chain in general is just hammered recently with shipping delays and ships backed up in ports and things of that nature. So it's all very relevant in today's day and age that people are looking to create efficiency, and using technology like RFID is just a great way to supplement or replace a human body that has to count a box or receive goods through a doorway. We can do all of those types of things.
That's great. Danny, do you want to add on to anything related to improving visibility and talk about some of the examples of inventory with your customers as well?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty about leveraging data collection technology, in this case RFID, you're receiving accurate data. So whatever you see, you're capturing it, you're sending it off to a system, whether it's an inventory system, warehouse management, ERP, whatever it might be. Those systems really is what tells you the meaningful data and information that you want to receive, so you can kind of get a pulse on what's happening within your warehouse, what's happening within your operation. So again, when you leverage that technology and you're getting accurate inventory, you're also getting accurate reports on what's happening. So you can forecast ahead of time. Hey, I've been plowing through a whole bunch of inventory of this particular SKU. I need to put more orders in ahead of time, because we're seeing lead times of inventory of products that you might be ordering today, and those lead times may have doubled, tripled over the past couple months, just based off the supply chain. So again, these types of systems allow you to capture meaningful data and utilize that data, and get a good idea as to what's happening in your operations.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. And since tracking inventory is obviously a really popular use case for RFID, we would like to share another poll related to that. So if you all wouldn't mind taking a moment again to let us know, what really interests you most about using RFID for inventory, since that seems to be a popular use case here. So I'm going to launch another poll here. If you all wouldn't mind to just take a moment and answer that for us. What would you like to achieve from using RFID for inventory management? We'd love to hear what some of the folks have to say. It's great, we're getting some answers. Excellent. I'll give you just one more moment. Got a couple more responses coming in. So, okay, I'll go ahead and share those results. And it looks like, visibility over parts and products, we had two folks that voted for that response there: tracking goods through the supply chain, automating inventory, and really better just data accuracy. So, I mean, with that in mind, RFID, it's a great tool for visibility for a lot of applications. Can you guys relate to those responses and, how people are using RFID to manage and locate inventory based on the different types of RFID that, we've deployed?
Yeah, I in a real world example that actually comes to mind is an opportunity where we had to work with a pharmaceutical company that manufactured pharmaceuticals, and they were in their environment. It's a very clean environment. They had to calibrate some of their manufacturing equipment, and it was very difficult for them to locate this calibration equipment inside of a manufacturing facility with 40 suites that are clean rooms. Basically, you have to wear a gown and a beard net and a hair net and booties over your feet. So going in and out of these suites to locate very sometimes small equipment is painful. And the equipment that they would calibrate ranged from small, very small micrometers to big, large conveyor belts or pill sorters, things like that. So what we enabled for them was a solution where they could actually just open the door to the clean sweep and using a mobile RFID handheld computer, sweep the room and see if any of the assets they were looking for were in the room. And in addition to that, we created zones within the facility. So instead of looking through 40 different suites for a possible part, they were able to narrow down and say, well, we know it's in zone 1 or zone 2, basically using some fixed portals or gateways that when the equipment would travel through into zone A, we made an assumption that it was still in zone A because that's the last place we saw it. And then we were able to reduce their search time from the whole 40 suite facility down to maybe 10 or 5 or 10 suites. So very quickly they were able to turn around or reduce the search time, and which enabled them to do their calibrations on time and keep their production lines running in a much more efficient manner. So it's not necessarily a warehouse solution, but in a manufacturing solution, I'm sure it relates to folks who are trying to locate assets or, especially in warehouses that reuse bins or carts or things like that in their processes. You can track a picking cart that might be used in a retail situation where people are putting items on a cart, right? And what can you do with that information? For one, you can locate the cart, but 2, you can see how quickly that cart is moving about your facility. So you gain a lot of information about what's happening in your operation that you couldn't see before you implemented.
I'm sure that's really valuable for different businesses. Danny, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I know we're going to dive into this on a later slide, but utilizing RFID technologies, whether it's active or passive, for locating specific things and having visibility of it, it's all about how it's been deployed. So, if you have a certain deployment where you have fixed RFID readers throughout your facility, you can have very granular information as to where things are virtually in real time. So if you're looking for something in specific, whether it's a work order, a pallet, a piece of equipment, an employee, fork truck, whatever it is, you can type that into the system and say, hey, where is this thing right now? And it'll pop up. You could have a map and say, hey, it's in this corner of the building. Again, depending on how granular you are, it could say it's within this zone, or it was last seen in this particular location. So you can, immediately walk over there and pick up that item and move it around whatever you need to do with it. So again, you can get pretty darn granular with this type of technology and where your things are.
Nice. Well, with that, we'll move on. Another really popular use case is automating and improving your visibility within a workflow. So, can you guys give us a couple examples of where you've seen RFID used to automate a workflow in the warehouse? I know, you've had a couple customers that, really just, they had the wrong hardware in place. They didn't have the right tools. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those applications?
Yeah, so we ran into an opportunity where a client already had an RFID infrastructure in place. They were utilizing RFID to track products as they move throughout their production line. And at the end of the day, we went on site, we did a little evaluation, tried to figure out what's going on, where their inefficiencies are, where they can improve, so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, it wasn't the technology that was the issue. The technology was just fine, but it was the type of hardware that they really had. So you'll find out when you start getting into these RFID projects that there are hundreds upon thousands of different components to a project. So there's different antennas, they're rated for different applications, they have different distances in which they read in. Same thing with different tags. So it's just a matter of optimizing those pieces to really give you the best visibility for your operations. So again, that was a pretty down and dirty, simple application where it's just rip and replace hardware, kept the same system. So everything was working smoothly after the fact.
Yeah.
I think to further elaborate on that a little bit, if I recall, the problem was the hardware was seeing so many tags that the customer couldn't rely on the data that they were getting. They wanted specific information from a specific tag at a specific time, and they were getting all of this collateral reads, and they couldn't decipher or didn't have probably the working knowledge of the system to be able to filter out any other data or what have you. So what we did was we really narrowed down the range of the hardware to ensure that the customer was reading the tag that they thought they were reading, or that their target tag. And what that actually is going to enable them to do in a kind of a phase 2 of the project is automate some of their other processes that they're doing manually in their work in process system, because they can rely on the data that they're getting now. So that's kind of, to further elaborate on that project, I think that's, that little bit of technical detail is very important, that, sometimes you can get so much information that you don't know what to do with all of it. And that's where we bring some expertise, right?
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's also a good transition too, into really talking about the different components of an RFID system. So if we want to take kind of a step back and just talk about some of the basic components of what makes up a typical RFID system, that might be another starting point for us. So Danny, could you tell us a little bit about the basic components of an RFID system, some of the things that you mentioned, like antennas and readers and things like that?
Yeah, sure. So obviously the tags, they come in a number of different form factors. They're all rated for different applications, whether you're applying RFID tags on metal assets or on paper products, boxes, so on and so forth. So there are hard tags. There are just general paper label tags that you can apply. So again, that's, that is what essentially has the unique ID, and that would be the identifier that you'll be trying to find or trying to capture when you're utilizing these RFID readers to perform inventory or work in process applications, so on and so forth. So moving over to the readers is essentially what allows you to capture the data and filter and manipulate the data that you're seeing through the tags, and sending that over to a database somewhere. The antennas are kind of act one and the same as the readers. They're just an additional component to an RFID reader. The antennas are emitting an RF signal and trying to see whatever is within its field. The printers, again, they would print and encode the RFID labels if you are using RFID labels. So very similar to the the barcode labels that you might be printing today, or really any label that you're printing today. Virtually the same printer, they just have a different module built into it, so you can print and encode an RFID value onto the RFID label or RFID inlay itself. And the last component here would be software, and that is essentially what is giving you that meaningful data that we've been talking about earlier. You're capturing a whole bunch of tags, but you need to know where they are, how long they've been there, which tags are being seen, and why. The software, again, is what allows you to run those reports, so you can see what that data is and what it's doing and run reports.
That's great. And if we want to, continue that conversation a little bit further, dive a little bit deeper into those different types of RFID technology, you talk about like the different methodology and what goes into choosing the right tag, the right, readers, portals, or whatever is going to be in place to help track things in different environments. So, Danny, all RFID deployments are not the same. Can you tell us a little bit about, what goes into choosing some of these components?
Yeah, so if you've seen one RFID deployment, you've pretty much only seen one RFID deployment. I would say 90% of the time they're unique. They might have the same concept. I want to perform cycle counts, inventory, or I want to locate specific things. But again, at the end of the day, the components might be different. It might be different tags, might be different antennas, different configurations on your readers and portals, so on and so forth. But I just want to really stress that when you're deploying an RFID solution, it's always, it's nice to think outside the box, but understand the physics behind the technology. So when you're deploying a project, you might be utilizing both passive and active at the same time, or you might be using handheld and a RFID portal or gateway for the same processes, or they might be using it for different processes. So pretty much where I'm getting at is a lot of times people are using a combination of technologies to give you meaningful information. And that's where, RMS Omega can come into play and say, hey, here's some methods on how you can deploy the technology. Here's how you can utilize it so you can improve your processes.
Yeah, and I know a lot of times the environment comes into play too. Some things can interfere with the readability of the tags. What are some of those environmental factors?
I think a great example of that is, again, that the pharma company that I was talking about is a very metal rich environment, and we were tagging metal assets. And if you've done any research at all on RFID, you realize that metal reflects RFID signal or waves or whatever you want to call it. It's a reflective, and it bounces stuff around. And sometimes that's bad. Sometimes it's great, because if you're just trying to see, hey, is something in a suite, and the signal's bouncing off everything, maybe you can see something at a farther distance than what you would in a wide open field or something of that nature, a construction area, something like that. So sometimes that is a detriment, sometimes it's an advantage. Other things like carbon fiber absorb, right? Any liquids absorb that signal and kill it dead. So the environment that you're in is probably the largest variable in implementing RFID, and some of the biggest challenges that we face are environmental challenges. A lot of just weird things, like a microwave, for example, can throw an RFID signal into disarray and deplete it. So that's a lot of times why we, when we start talking about methodology, we do really, we always want to do a solid discovery and make sure we have the right tag, and we have maybe the right hardware to help maximize your read rates and really create the efficiency that you're looking for. So all of that is, the methodology that we talk about, again, the pharma company is, that's what I would call a hybrid solution, right? We're using fixed to shrink our search zone, and then we're using a mobile handheld to actually go pinpoint and locate stuff. So that's that fixed versus mobile versus hybrid here on this slide. That's kind of, we see a lot of hybrid solutions and implement a lot of hybrid solutions. And I think all of that's important when you're thinking about designing a solution.
Right.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, I mean, you might be reading online and says RFID does not work with metal, or it does not work with liquids. That's not always the case. Don't be disappointed when you read that, because there are several tags, there are different readers that are tuned for that particular application. So don't run away from a project if you're tagging, metal assets, fork trucks, whatever it might be. There are times where I don't think that it's going to work, and we do some testing and it works out great, and you're like, wow, this actually worked out. So, we surprise ourselves all the time with these types of projects, and it's just a matter of, making sure the expectations are correct, and you test it, you validate it, make sure that it's working properly. You're getting the reliable reads that you're looking for, so you can successfully deploy the project.
That's great.
And another thing to kind of mention here is, sometimes you have to look at your process and tweak your process upstream or downstream of where you're at. So a great example of that is a company that was loading a bin with frozen meat, and they couldn't, as they were trying to perform a ship confirm going out a dock door, they couldn't read all of the tags, because the frozen meat acted like an insulator and wouldn't allow the tag to be read. So the way that we kind of attack that is, if you read the tag from above as you're building that bin full of frozen meat and validate everything that goes in the bin, then all you have to ship confirm is the bin. So there's lots of different ways to tackle some of these environmental challenges, right? Or some of these product specific challenges that we come across. And that's again, another kind of talking point as to why we want to come in and do a lot of discovery and really try to understand your processes and your environment before we would recommend a solution.
That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing. So to dive into a couple other examples, I mean, we've listed a few customers here where we have been working on some RFID projects with. One that's really cool in particular, it's not a warehouse, but actually a healthcare system. Could be used in a warehouse, same type of an application. But Josh, could you tell us a little bit about the work that was done at Mary Washington Healthcare System?
Yeah, so Mary Washington Healthcare is in Virginia, and what they're trying, what the issue that they asked us to help them with was they had patient monitoring, these small portable patient monitoring devices, and they were very expensive. I think they were somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 a piece. But they're, very kind of a small device that when a patient would leave the facility, these devices would get wrapped up in the bedding, and they would go into the laundry, and they would leave the facility in the laundry truck, and then they would never return. So what we recommended for them was in the laundry chutes, because you didn't want to track these leaving the suites because they do move them throughout the building. But really where we figured out we could kind of ensure that we were getting these before they left the building, we put RFID antennas and readers directly above the laundry chutes. So if a device was rolled up in bed sheets and went down into the laundry chute, we got a read, and it would send alerts to folks to say, hey, this tagged asset went through laundry chute on the 3rd floor, or into the laundry bin on the 3rd floor, and somebody could immediately go retrieve it from that. Right. And we also put some fail safes in. These bins would then be wheeled throughout the facility in the back hallways and in the basement. And what we did was we put a portal at the very last entry point before it would go out to the dock doors and be loaded on the truck. And what we did there was we made this very loud, obnoxious siren go off and lights flash and everything if one of these devices was read at that portal. So we had, fail safes in, a backup plan, because these devices were, like I said, $10,000 a piece.
Yeah.
And the customer, within, I think, 10 days of implementing the system, emailed us and said that the system had paid for itself.
That's great. Yeah. So RFID, inventory tracking, visibility, obviously asset tracking. It's all great use cases when it comes to using different RFID technology. So with that, I'm going to move us into some questions and open up for questions. So if you all have any questions that you'd like to ask about RFID technology, our different processes, please go ahead and chat them to us in the Q&A section of your control panel. I do have one question for you guys to start us off. What type of RFID technology do you sell most often? And I think you kind of touched on that earlier on in our discussion. But if you want to go ahead and talk about a little bit about that, like what you are typically deploying most often. Go ahead.
So I would say that 80 to 90% of these projects are generally passive. But again, active is certainly an option for a lot of opportunities. And the key driver to kind of determine which technology to use would be that, discovery, say, hey, I need to figure out what's going on in here and why, what's going to provide me with the best visibility. So yeah, in most cases, it is passive.
Okay.
I think from a hardware perspective, passive is obviously the most, tag solution, but even just, from a hardware sense, I would say that we do a lot of hybrid where we have a fixed reader and a mobile reader, and the reason for that varies everywhere we go, right? Like again, not to beat the dead horse with the pharma company, but due to that pinpoint locationing in the price range that the customer had available, right? That's how we got there, was with a mobile reader and less fixed infrastructure. Other reasons that you might do that is you may want to allow your workforce to print barcode labels or RFID labels from a mobile computer. So even though you have fixed infrastructure doing your receiving or your ship confirms, in your inventory process or something of that nature, you're still using a handheld to perform that. So, that's from a hardware sense, I think a hybrid solution like that fits almost everywhere we go.
Okay, that's great. We have another question. How long does it typically take to implement a system? I think that can vary. If you guys want to go ahead and address that.
Yeah, I mean, again, it all depends on the system, right? It all depends on what the goal is of implementing the technology. If you're just looking to perform some basic receiving function at a small dock door and you can do that with a handheld, or you're looking to do inventory in a retail environment, that's just a handheld and some software, maybe a few weeks from start to finish. Sometimes it's months and months and months to implement something, depending on the complexity and how many problems we're solving or what we're doing. I don't know, Danny, if you have some specific things you want to kind of give it as an example. I mean, I know like Nexus was pretty easy, right? But
Yeah, you hit it on the head. I would say that the sweet spot is probably anywhere between, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months. It's probably, usually the deployment times. But yeah, I mean, look, if there are some where there are just a couple weeks. Handhelds, you already have an idea as to what the tags are going to be. Software, there's no integrations with pre-existing systems, so it's standalone. Those are generally easier ones to wrap up. But then when there's customization and integration and different tags and different process changes, then obviously those tend to drag on a little bit. But again, sweet spot's about 2 to 3 months, I would say.
Okay. And what are some of the roadblocks to anticipate when you're looking at putting together an RFID system? Are there any like typical roadblocks that you would run into or things that you see often?
I think the first thing would be environmental challenges. Again, obviously, if you're in a metal-rich environment, you just got to make sure that the tags and the technology works appropriately. I guess another piece would be just the adoption of technology and the adoption of possible process changes. People tend to do what they continue to do and they don't like changing it. While this technology might seem like a drastic change, and in many cases it is, it's for the better and it can make your life a lot easier. So again, process changes and environmental challenges would probably be my top two.
I think the most challenging thing in almost all of the opportunities we work in is the software element, right? The anticipation of integrating with or replacing a system or running this as a standalone system to do certain business functions or augment process. Those are all things that, again, during a discovery, we like to talk about. We like to at least try to get a little bit of knowledge or help customers maybe with enough knowledge so they can make real decisions on whether they want to integrate fully or they just want this to be a standalone system. I think that's one of the most challenging pieces of all these is, and most of the time the customer doesn't know, right? So we have to kind of lead them down that path, right, Danny? Where, we have to ask them the right questions so they begin to understand the breadth of or the width of their project and how much they can really do with the data they're about to get. Hope that answers the question a little bit.
Okay. I have one more open question. What should I anticipate in terms of cost? So if you guys could talk about like how the ranges of some of these projects, what to expect in terms of cost.
Yeah, done projects that are relatively inexpensive, a handful of RFID labels, handheld scanner, and some basic software. Generally, those projects run anywhere between the $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 range. But there are also more complex solutions where there's a number of fixed readers across a facility that might have 50 bay doors, millions of RFID tags, software integrations, so on and so forth. And those projects tend to run up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. But again, I think the sweet spot is anywhere between the, I don't know, 30, 50, $60,000 range for something that's more of a hybrid solution that encompasses, a good amount of RFID handheld scanners and fixed readers and tags and all that stuff.
Great.
I think an important thing when it relates to cost is I think that many people don't associate it, but and I think we need to educate people about is the cost of the tags goes up. If you're looking at a traditional barcode tag compared to an RFID tag, right, Danny? And that's recurring cost, right? So there's capital cost in these projects and there's recurring costs, just like anything else. And that's the one thing that I think, people are surprised by and is the tags cost quite a bit more when you put an RFID inlay in them. So, it's just something to be aware of. I firmly believe that RFID technology, as long as the return on investment is there, that recurring cost is just part of the cost of doing business, but you're saving X amount more through the efficiency you gain. So it's all just part of the equation when you're starting to look at what something costs and how long is it going to take to get my return, right? Those are the basic questions that you ask yourself anytime you make a business decision. So I think it's just important to educate people on, there is capital cost, but there's also recurring costs that are going to go up too, maybe.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. I don't have any other questions right now. So we'll go ahead and wrap up. And, I'd like to thank you all again for joining. If you do have additional questions about RFID technology, we invite you to schedule a one-on-one call or an evaluation with us. We're here to answer any questions that you have. When we close the webinar, you will be directed to a page where you can contact us or sign up for a meeting. You can also download our article and some infographics. So we're always happy to help send additional resources if you're just researching and want to learn more about the benefits of using RFID and its capabilities. So don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you all again for joining us. Have a great day. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Danny.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.